The Grand Hall of the Hegemony Council stretched for miles beneath a crystal dome that showed the stars beyond. 12 different alien species sat in their designated seats, each representing worlds that had bowed to Krek's power over the centuries. At the center of it all, Supreme Admiral Vorthak stood tall on his 6 legs, his purple skin gleaming under the artificial lights. The primitives on the 3rd planet of the Sol system have been observed for long enough, Vorthak announced to the council. His voice carried the weight of authority that had conquered 47 star systems. They call themselves humans, and they are ready for integration into our empire. The council members shifted in their seats. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few breathed different gases through special masks. But they all shared the same look of bored acceptance. Another primitive world was about to join their empire, whether it wanted to or not. Their technology is laughable, continued Vorthak, as holographic images appeared above the council floor. The images showed human cities, human vehicles, and human spacecraft. They have barely learned to travel between planets. Their ships move like drunken beetles compared to our vessels. A representative from the Nexari species, with their large compound eyes, clicked their mandibles in amusement. How many ships do they have that can actually leave their home system? Our scouts report perhaps 200 vessels capable of interstellar flight, Vorthak replied. Most are cargo ships or research vessels. They have perhaps 30 ships that could be called warships, though that term is generous. Laughter rippled through the council chamber. 30 warships against the might of the hegemony seemed like a joke. The smallest Krek's patrol fleet contained more firepower than the entire human space navy. What about their military capabilities on the surface? Asked another council member. This one from a species that looked like walking trees. Vorthak gestured, and the hologram changed to show human soldiers and weapons. They still fight with projectile weapons and chemical explosives. Their most advanced weapons are barely more sophisticated than what our ancestors used 1,000 years ago. They have nuclear weapons, but so did most species when we first encountered them. Nuclear weapons, scoffed the Nexari representative. How quaint. Do they still think such crude devices pose a threat to modern shielding? The interesting part is not their weapons, Vorthak continued, but their behavior. Our anthropologists have studied their culture extensively. They are a fractured species, always fighting among themselves. Even now, as we speak, they wage war on their own planet in dozens of locations. They cannot agree on government, religion, or basic social structures. The tree-like council member leaned forward with interest. Fractured societies are easier to control. Their inability to unite has always been the downfall of primitive species. Exactly, Vorthak agreed. When faced with superior force, they will likely surrender individual nations rather than risk total destruction. Those who do resist will find no support from their neighbors. It is the same pattern we have seen on every primitive world. An elderly member of the Altarian species, humanoid but with blue skin and silver eyes, raised a hand. What is their population and industrial capacity? Approximately 8 billion individuals on their homeworld, with perhaps 1 million more scattered across their few colonies, Vorthak read from his datapad. Their industrial base is focused primarily on their home planet. They have some mining operations in asteroid fields and on their moon, but nothing that could support a prolonged war effort. 8 billion, mused the Altarian. A reasonable population for a new addition to our workforce. Their genetic diversity might prove useful for certain types of labor. Vorthak nodded. Our projections indicate they could provide excellent workers for mining operations, especially in hazardous environments. Humans appear to be remarkably adaptable to different atmospheric conditions. The Council continued to discuss Earth's resources and strategic value. They talked about human strengths and weaknesses like scientists discussing lab animals. No one questioned whether humanity deserved conquest. That was simply how the galaxy worked. Strong species ruled, weak species served. What of their defensive preparations? Asked the Nexari representative. Surely they must realize we exist by now. Our survey ships have been observed in their system. They have made some attempts to organize planetary defenses, Vorthak admitted. But their efforts are scattered and uncoordinated. Some nations are building space platforms. Others are developing new weapons. But there is no unified command structure. They cannot even agree on whether we represent a threat. Typical primitive behavior, the tree-like being observed. They will waste time arguing about the appropriate response while we take their world. Vorthok touched a control, and a new hologram appeared. This one showed the current date and a countdown timer. I propose we issue the standard ultimatum. Surrender within one of their solar days, or face total military action. This will give their leaders time to contact each other and hopefully reach the correct decision. And if they refuse? Asked the Altarian elder. Then we demonstrate why refusal is not an option, Vorthok replied coldly. I will personally lead the invasion fleet. 3 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers, and 40 support vessels should be more than adequate to secure their homeworld and primary colonies. The council voted unanimously to approve the action. It was a simple matter, really. Another primitive world would join the hegemony, just like all the others before them. The humans would either surrender peacefully or be forced to submit. Either way, the result would be the same. As the council session ended, Vorthok made his way to his private chambers to compose the official ultimatum. He had written dozens of these over the years, and they all followed the same basic format. State superior force, demand surrender, offer minimal terms for compliance, and set a short deadline for response. The message was transmitted to Earth exactly 6 hours later, broadcast on all frequencies the humans used for communication. It was simple and direct, translated into the major human languages by sophisticated computer programs. People of Earth, you are now aware that you are not alone in the galaxy. The hegemony of Krex offers you the opportunity to join our empire peacefully. You have 1 solar day to announce your surrender and prepare for integration. Resistance will result in the total conquest of your world and the enslavement of your species. Choose wisely. Vorthok leaned back in his command chair and waited for the inevitable response. In his experience, primitive species took 12 to 18 hours to realize they had no choice. He expected the humans would follow the same pattern. He was wrong. 24 hours and 37 minutes after the ultimatum was broadcast to Earth, Supreme Admiral Vorthok received humanity's response. It came as a simple text message transmitted from Earth's moon, broadcast on the same frequencies the hegemony had used for their demands. The entire message consisted of one word: no. Vorthok stared at the communication display for several long moments. In all his years of conquest, no primitive species had ever responded with such brevity. Usually there were long speeches about freedom, desperate attempts at negotiation, or detailed explanations of why surrender was impossible. The humans had simply said no, and left it at that. Prepare the invasion fleet, Vorthok ordered his staff officers. These primitives need to learn the consequences of defying the hegemony. The Krex invasion force that entered Earth's solar system 3 days later was impressive by any standard. 3 massive heavy cruisers led the formation, each one stretching over a mile in length. Behind them came 12 destroyers, fast and deadly ships designed to hunt down fleeing vessels. 40 support ships brought up the rear, carrying troops, supplies, and occupation equipment. As the fleet approached Earth's orbit, Vorthok studied the tactical displays with growing confusion. His sensors showed unusual activity throughout the solar system. There were energy signatures from the asteroid belt that hadn't been there during their reconnaissance missions. Several large objects were moving near the planet Jupiter that didn't match any known human spacecraft designs. Admiral, his tactical officer called out, "We're detecting multiple launch events from the human homeworld and its moon. It appears they're launching everything they have." Vorthok examined the sensor data. Human ships were indeed rising from Earth, and its moon in numbers greater than intelligence had suggested. But something was wrong with the formation patterns. These weren't the panicked, uncoordinated launches of a desperate species. The human ships were moving with precision and purpose. "How many vessels are we facing?" Vorthok asked. "Initial count shows approximately 200 spacecraft," the tactical officer replied. "But sir, many of these ships don't match our intelligence reports. Some appear to be completely new designs." The first engagement began when the human fleet reached the outer edge of Earth's gravitational field. Vorthok expected the humans to maintain a defensive posture. trying to protect their homeworld while hoping for mercy. Instead, the human ships immediately accelerated toward the Krek's fleet at maximum speed. "They're attacking," Vorthak said in disbelief. "Do they not understand the difference in our capabilities?" The answer came quickly. The first wave of human ships opened fire with weapons that made Vorthak's tactical computers scream warnings. Instead of the primitive projectile weapons intelligence had reported, the humans were using directed energy beams and plasma cannons. Not only that, but the weapons were clearly based on Krek's technology. "How do they have our weapons?" demanded Vorthak. "Our reconnaissance ships were never captured or destroyed in their system." His communications officer looked up from her station with alarm. "Sir, I'm detecting transmissions between human ships. They're sharing targeting data and tactical information in real time across their entire fleet. Every ship knows what every other ship is seeing." The battle quickly became unlike anything in Vorthak's experience. Human ships fought with a coordination that seemed impossible for a primitive species. When Krek's vessels tried to separate individual human ships from the main group, the humans simply reformed their fleet structure within minutes. When the Kreks used advanced jamming techniques, the humans adapted their communication methods faster than the jamming could be adjusted. But what truly disturbed Vorthak was how the humans fought when they were losing. A human destroyer, its hull burning and atmosphere venting into space, rammed directly into the side of a Krek's heavy cruiser. Instead of trying to escape or surrender, the human crew had chosen to die while taking their enemies with them. "This is not normal behavior," Vorthak muttered as he watched another human ship deliberately crash into a Krek's destroyer. "Primitives are supposed to value their own lives above all else." The tactical situation grew worse as the battle continued. Human ships that had been damaged or disabled didn't simply float helplessly waiting for rescue. Instead, their crews seemed to be studying Krek's technology even while their ships were dying. Vorthak watched in horror as a human engineering team, working in vacuum suits on the outside of their crippled vessel, literally cut pieces off a nearby Krek ship and began installing them on their own hull. "They're adapting our technology during the battle itself," the tactical officer reported. "Sir, this should be impossible. It takes our engineers months to integrate new technology into existing ships." "How long have they been fighting?" Vorthak asked. "The engagement began 4 hours and 23 minutes ago, sir." 4 hours, and the humans were already modifying their ships with stolen Krek's technology. Vorthak had seen some adaptable species in his time, but nothing like this. It was as if the humans were treating the battle as some kind of learning exercise. The real shock came when Vorthak noticed something impossible on his sensors. The humans weren't just learning from captured technology, they were improving on it. A human ship that had been fitted with a captured Krek shield generator was somehow producing more power than the original design specifications allowed. "Admiral," his sensor operator called out urgently, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the inner solar system. Multiple large objects are approaching our position at high speed." Vorthak looked at the main display and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of conquest. Genuine fear. What his sensors were showing him couldn't be real. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter was moving. Not individual asteroids, but entire sections of the belt were somehow accelerating toward the battle. "Those aren't asteroids," he said slowly. "They're ships." The objects approaching from the inner solar system were indeed ships, but unlike anything Vorthak had ever seen, they appeared to be constructed from asteroids themselves, massive fortress-like vessels that dwarfed even his heavy cruisers. As they drew closer, Vorthak could see that they bristled with weapons that were clearly human modifications of Krek's technology. "How long have they been building these?" he wondered aloud. His intelligence officer reviewed her data with shaking hands. "Sir, based on the construction patterns, these vessels appear to have been built in the past 4 days. Since we issued our ultimatum, that's impossible." "Sir, I'm also detecting similar construction activities near the planet Jupiter and in the outer system. The humans appear to have converted their entire asteroid mining operation into a ship construction facility." The battle was no longer going according to plan. What should have been a simple conquest had become a desperate fight for survival. Krek ships that had entered the system with confidence were now retreating as fast as their engines could carry them. Vorthak made the hardest decision of his military career. All ships, withdraw to minimum safe distance. We need to reassess this situation. As the Krek's fleet retreated from Earth's solar system, Vorthak tried to understand what had gone wrong. His intelligence had been accurate about human technology and military capacity, but no one had predicted their ability to adapt and innovate under pressure. The retreat gave him time to study the battle recordings and prepare a report for the Hegemony Council. But as he reviewed the data, one thing became clear. Humanity was not like the other primitive species they had conquered. These humans were something entirely different. 6 months after the failed invasion of Earth, Supreme Admiral Vorthak stood before the Hegemony Council once again. This time, his usual confidence had been replaced by barely controlled anxiety. The holographic displays around the council chamber showed star maps that would have been unthinkable just a year ago. The human situation has become more serious than we initially calculated, Vorthak began, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. What we believed was a simple primitive species has proven to be something far more dangerous. The Nexari representative clicked his mandibles in irritation. How dangerous can one small species be? Send a larger fleet and crush them. We did send a larger fleet, Vorthak replied grimly. 3 times, in fact. Each time, the humans have not only repelled our forces but learned something new from the encounter. They are no longer using modified versions of our technology. They have begun developing improvements to our designs. A new hologram appeared above the council floor, showing technical specifications that made several council members gasp in surprise. The data displayed human weapons that generated 30% more power than equivalent Krek systems while using fewer resources. This is impossible, stated the tree-like representative. No primitive species can innovate faster than established technology. It takes centuries to develop meaningful improvements to energy weapon systems. The humans are not following normal development patterns, Vorthak explained. They appear to treat every battle as a learning opportunity. Our analysts believe they are somehow sharing knowledge instantly across their entire species. When one human learns something, they all learn it. The Altarian elder leaned forward with interest. Are you suggesting they have some form of collective consciousness? No, sir. Our psychologists report that humans are definitely individual entities, but they have created communication and education systems that allow rapid sharing of information. A human engineer who discovers a new technique can teach it to thousands of other engineers within hours. Show us the extent of their expansion, ordered the council leader. The star map changed to show the region around Earth's solar system. Red dots indicated confirmed human presence, yellow dots showed probable human activity, and green dots marked systems where human ships had been detected but not confirmed as permanent settlements. The council chamber fell silent. The display showed hundreds of red and yellow dots spreading out from Earth in all directions. In 6 months, humanity had established a presence in more star systems than most species managed in decades of expansion. How is this possible? Whispered the Nexari representative. We had complete intelligence on human capabilities. They possessed perhaps a dozen interstellar vessels. They did, Vorthak confirmed. But those dozen vessels were not exploration ships as we assumed. They were mobile construction platforms. Each human colony ship was actually a complete industrial facility capable of building more ships using local resources. The implications of this hit the council immediately. Traditional space expansion required expensive supply lines back to the homeworld. Species had to carefully plan each colony to ensure it could be supported until it became self-sufficient. The humans had simply skipped that entire process by making each ship completely self-contained. The humans call this approach exponential expansion, Vorthak continued. Each ship builds 2 more ships before establishing a colony. Those ships build more ships, and so on. Their growth rate is not linear. It multiplies. What about resistance from local populations? Asked the Altarian elder. Surely some species in those systems objected to human colonization. Vorthak hesitated before answering. This was the part of his report that would truly alarm the council. Sir, The humans are not conquering these systems. They are liberating them. Explain, demanded the council leader. Many of the systems now showing human presence were already under hegemony control. When human ships arrive, they do not attack the local population. Instead, they make contact with any species being governed by our forces and offer them what they call assistance in achieving self-determination. The council chamber erupted in alarmed voices from multiple species. The tree-like representative stood up abruptly, his bark-like skin changing color with stress. Are you telling us that humans are encouraging rebellion in our territories? Not encouraging, sir. Teaching. Human military advisors are sharing tactical knowledge, weapons technology, and organizational methods with any species that expresses interest in independence from hegemony rule. Vorthak activated another hologram, this one showing battle reports from across hegemony space. The data painted a picture that made the Council's worst fears look optimistic. Rebellions had broken out in 47 different systems. Local species that had been peacefully under hegemony rule for decades were suddenly developing advanced weapons and sophisticated military strategies. The pattern is always the same, Vorthak explained. A human diplomatic vessel arrives and makes peaceful contact with local leaders. They share information about human society and government, focusing on concepts like individual freedom and species self-determination. Within weeks, the local population begins questioning hegemony authority. And if we attempt to suppress these rebellions? Asked the Nixari representative. That's when the humans provide military assistance. They don't send armies, sir. They send teachers. Human military advisors work with local species to develop tactics that take advantage of their natural abilities and local environmental conditions. The Altarian elder studied the tactical reports with growing concern. These rebel forces are using strategies I've never seen before. They strike supply lines instead of military targets. They attack communication networks instead of ships. They seem to understand our weaknesses better than we do. The humans call it asymmetric warfare, Vorthak said. Instead of trying to match our superior firepower, they teach local species to attack the systems that our superior firepower depends upon. Our supply chains, our communication networks, our administrative structures. What do the humans gain from this? Asked the council leader. What do they want in exchange for their assistance? 1. What do they want in exchange for their assistance? This question had puzzled Vorthak's analysts for months. Traditional conquest made sense. Species fought to gain territory, resources, or strategic advantages, but human behavior followed no pattern they could understand. According to our intelligence, the humans ask for nothing in exchange for their assistance. They provide weapons, technology, and tactical advice freely to any species that requests help in achieving independence. Their only requirement is that the liberated species agrees not to attack or conquer other species. That makes no sense, the tree-like representative objected. No species provides military assistance without expecting something in return. The human diplomatic messages all contain the same basic concepts, Vorthak continued. They claim that freedom is a basic right of all intelligent species, and that no one has the right to rule another species without their consent. They appear to genuinely believe these ideas. The council chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The hegemony had built its power on the assumption that strong species naturally ruled weak ones. It was the fundamental law of galactic civilization, but the humans were teaching other species that this law was not inevitable. What do our analysts recommend? Asked the council leader finally. Vorthak looked around the chamber at the representatives of 12 different species, all of whom had learned to accept hegemony rule as natural and proper. Sir, our analysts believe that humanity represents the greatest threat to galactic stability in recorded history, not because of their military strength, but because of their ideas. Ideas can be controlled, the Altarian elder said firmly. Increase security. Limit communication. Eliminate human agents. We have tried those approaches, sir. The problem is that human ideas appear to be infectious. Once a species learns about concepts like democracy and self-determination, those ideas spread on their own. We cannot stop people from thinking. The council leader stood up, his massive frame dominating the chamber. Then we must eliminate the source. Prepare a final assault on the human homeworld. Mobilize every available ship in the hegemony. We will end this threat permanently. Vorthok nodded, but privately he wondered if it was already too late. The humans had changed something fundamental about how the galaxy worked. The question was no longer whether the hegemony could defeat humanity. The question was whether the hegemony could survive the ideas humanity had already spread. The rebellion began on Kelmar Prime with something as simple as a question. A young Kelmarian named Zeth looked up at his Krex overseer during morning work assignment and asked, "Why do you have the right to tell me what to do?" The overseer, a veteran of 30 years of colonial administration, was so surprised by the question that he didn't immediately punish the worker. That moment of hesitation was all it took. Other Kelmarians began asking the same question. Within hours, the entire work shift had stopped following orders. By the end of the week, every Kelmarian settlement on the planet had gone silent. The Krex garrison reported that the local population had simply walked away from their jobs and disappeared into the wilderness. Similar incidents were reported across the galaxy. On Nexar the 7th, the insectoid population refused to emerge from their underground cities. On Altarian colonies, the blue-skinned humanoids began holding meetings that excluded their Krex administrators. On dozens of worlds, species that had been peacefully controlled for generations suddenly began acting like they had other options. Supreme Admiral Vorthak received these reports in his flagship as he prepared for the final assault on Earth. The hegemony had gathered the largest military force in its history. Over 1,000 ships from 12 different species had been assembled into what council leaders called the Extinction Fleet. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving emergency transmissions from sector commanders across the galaxy. The rebellion is spreading faster than our intelligence networks can track." Vorthak studied the incoming reports with growing alarm. The pattern was always the same. Local populations would suddenly stop cooperating with hegemony authority. When military force was used to restore order, the rebels would disappear only to emerge somewhere else with better weapons and new tactics. "Show me the status of our supply lines," Vorthak ordered. The holographic display that appeared made his blood run cold. Red warning indicators marked disrupted supply routes throughout hegemony space. Convoys were being attacked by rebel forces that appeared and vanished like ghosts. Fuel depots were being sabotaged by workers who had served faithfully for decades. Communication relays were going dark across entire sectors. "How are they coordinating these attacks?" Vorthak demanded. "Our intelligence shows no central command structure among the rebel forces." His intelligence chief, a Nexari specialist in behavioral analysis, approached with obvious reluctance. "Sir, we believe the rebels are using a human organizational concept called cell-based resistance. Small groups operate independently, but follow the same general principles and methods." "What principles?" "The humans appear to have taught rebel groups a standard set of guidelines for resistance operations. Target supply lines rather than military bases. Avoid direct confrontation with superior forces. Protect civilian populations. Focus on disrupting administrative functions rather than destroying infrastructure." Vorthak realized the implications immediately. Traditional military responses were useless against enemies who refused to fight traditional battles. The hegemony war machine was designed to crush organized military forces, not to hunt down small groups of saboteurs scattered across hundreds of worlds. "What about the human presence in these rebellions?" he asked. "Our analysis suggests there are fewer than 10,000 human military advisors spread across the entire galaxy," the intelligence chief replied. "But their impact is far beyond their numbers. They seem to understand exactly how to maximize the effectiveness of each species they work with." A new report arrived that made the situation even worse. On Vexani Prime, the reptilian population had somehow acquired advanced shield technology and energy weapons. A Krex garrison of 5,000 troops had been forced to evacuate when their own weapons proved ineffective against rebel defenses. "Where did they get that technology?" Vorthak asked. "According to our technical analysis, it appears to be modified Krex equipment," came the unwelcome answer. "The rebels are taking our own weapons and improving them using human engineering principles." This was becoming a nightmare. Not only were rebel forces using hegemony technology, they were making it better. Reports came in of rebel ships outmaneuvering Krex destroyers, rebel ground forces defeating trained military units, and rebel engineers solving technical problems that stumped hegemony specialists. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth. It appears to be directed specifically at our fleet." "Put it on the main screen," Vorthak ordered. The image that appeared showed a human woman in what appeared to be a simple civilian outfit. She was sitting in a basic room with no visible military equipment or symbols of authority. When she spoke, her voice was calm and friendly. "Greetings to the crews of the hegemony fleet currently approaching our solar system. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I serve as Earth's diplomatic representative. I would like to speak directly to every individual serving aboard your ships, regardless of their species or rank." Vorthak started to order the transmission cut off, but hesitated. Something about the human's manner made him curious about what she would say. "We know that many of you joined the hegemony military because you believed it would bring peace and stability to the galaxy. We understand that you have families and homes that you are trying to protect. We respect your dedication to your people and your willingness to serve." The human paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a weight that seemed to reach across space itself. "But we want you to consider a question that your own people are asking across the galaxy right now. Is it truly necessary for one species to rule all others? Is peace only possible when everyone follows the same laws, enforced by the same military power?" Around the bridge, Vorthak noticed that his crew members were listening with unusual attention. Even hardened veterans who had conquered dozens of worlds seemed affected by the human's words. "We believe that lasting peace comes not from forcing everyone to be the same, but from teaching everyone to respect each other's differences. We believe that every species has the right to choose their own government, their own culture, and their own future." The human leaned forward slightly, and her next words seemed to be directed at each individual listener personally. "If you agree with these ideas, you have a choice to make. You can continue fighting to preserve a system that requires constant military force to maintain, or you can help us build something better, something that doesn't need armies to survive because it's based on cooperation instead of conquest." The transmission ended with coordinates for a rendezvous point, where any ships wanting to discuss terms could meet safely. No weapons would be fired, no crews would be arrested, no species would be punished for asking questions. In the silence that followed, Vorthak looked around his bridge and saw something that terrified him more than any weapons system. His crew was thinking. For the first time in their military careers, they were questioning whether their orders were right. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "request permission to speak privately." "Denied," Vorthak snapped. "All personnel return to your duties," but he could see it in their eyes. The human had planted a seed that would grow no matter how hard he tried to stop it. For the first time in hegemony history, military personnel were wondering if there might be an alternative to endless conquest. The extinction fleet continued toward Earth, but Vorthak knew that victory was no longer certain. The humans had turned the galaxy's own people against the system that controlled them. The real war had just begun. When the extinction fleet entered Earth's solar system, Supreme Admiral Vorthak expected to find a heavily fortified planet, desperately preparing for its last stand. What he found instead was something that defied every principle of military strategy he had ever learned. Earth's solar system had been transformed into the galaxy's largest display of peaceful intent. Every asteroid, moon, and artificial structure in the system broadcast the same message on all frequencies. Instead of weapons targeting data or defensive coordinates, the transmissions carried libraries, complete databases of human art, music, literature, and scientific knowledge were being freely shared with anyone who wanted to receive them. "Sir," his communications officer reported with obvious confusion, "we're being invited to download Earth's entire cultural database. They're offering to teach us human history, technology, and philosophy." "It's obviously some kind of trap," Vorthak replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Nothing about human behavior had followed expected patterns. Why should their final defense be any different? The tactical displays showed something even more disturbing. Human ships were rising from Earth and its colonies, but they weren't forming battle formations. Instead, they were organizing into what appeared to be escort groups. As Vorthak's fleet approached the inner system, human vessels moved to surround each hegemony ship individually. "They're not trying to destroy us," his tactical officer observed. "They're positioning themselves to provide protection." Protection from what? The answer came as massive energy signatures appeared throughout the system. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt and behind the outer planets revealed themselves as they launched thousands of vessels. But these weren't warships. Vorthak's sensors identified them as colony ships, transport vessels, and communication platforms. "Admiral," his sensor operator called out urgently, "I'm detecting launch events from Earth itself. Thousands of ships are lifting off from the planet's surface." The main display showed an impossible sight. Colony ships were streaming away from Earth in every direction, each one carrying signals that identified their destinations. The ships weren't fleeing. They were heading toward every hegemony-controlled world in the galaxy. "They're not running away," Vorthak realized with growing amazement. "They're launching the largest colonization effort in galactic history." Quote, "A priority transmission reached his flagship from Earth's surface. When he opened the channel, Vorthak found himself looking at the same human diplomat who had addressed his fleet weeks earlier. "Admiral Vorthak," Elena Rodriguez said calmly, "thank you for coming to witness humanity's response to your declaration of war. As you can see, we have chosen not to meet violence with violence." "What is the meaning of this display?" Vorthak demanded. "If you wish to surrender, simply state your terms." "We're not surrendering, Admiral. We're offering every species in your empire the same choice you tried to deny us. The freedom to choose their own destiny." Rodriguez gestured, and the transmission expanded to show a galaxy-wide map. Thousands of route indicators showed human colony ships heading toward every inhabited system under hegemony control. Each ship carries volunteers from every species that has chosen to join our alliance. They're bringing technology, knowledge, and most importantly, proof that cooperation works better than conquest. When they arrive at hegemony worlds, they will not demand surrender. They will simply offer an alternative. Vorthak stared at the display in shock. This wasn't a military strategy. This was something far more dangerous. The humans were offering hope. "You cannot seriously believe that primitive species will choose chaos over the stability we provide," he said. "Admiral, with respect, you have it backwards. You provide order through fear. We offer stability through trust. Your system requires constant military force to maintain. Ours grows stronger every time someone freely chooses to join." As if to prove her point, Vorthak's communication systems began receiving signals from ships in his own fleet. Throughout the extinction fleet, crews were requesting permission to speak with human representatives, not to negotiate surrender, but to ask questions about how a different kind of society might work. "Sir," his communications officer reported quietly, "we have requests from over 200 ships asking for permission to send diplomatic parties to human vessels." This was the moment Vorthak had been dreading. His own people were more interested in learning from humans than fighting them. The human message of freedom was spreading through his fleet faster than any weapon could have destroyed it. "Admiral," Rodriguez continued, "I want to share something with you. In the past year, 47 different species have asked to join our alliance, not because we conquered them or threatened them, but because we showed them that voluntary cooperation creates better results than forced obedience." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a sadness that seemed genuine. "Your empire is dissolving not because we're destroying it, but because people are choosing to leave it. When given a real choice, most species prefer freedom over security, cooperation over control." The truth of her words was reflected in the status reports flooding Vorthak's command center. Across the galaxy, hegemony garrisons were reporting mass defections, not just among conquered species, but among Krek's personnel themselves. The promise of a society based on mutual respect, rather than military dominance, was proving irresistible. "What happens to those who choose to remain loyal to the hegemony?" Vorthak asked. "They're welcome to do so," Rodriguez replied. "We're not trying to force anyone to change. We simply believe that when people have genuine choices, They make better decisions. If some species prefer your system, they're free to maintain it. This answer disturbed Vorthak more than any threat could have. The humans were so confident in their approach that they were willing to let competitors exist. It suggested a level of certainty about human superiority that no military force could provide. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "I'm receiving a direct communication from the Hegemony Council. They're requesting immediate withdrawal from Earth's system." The message from the Council was brief and devastating. With rebellions erupting across their territory and their own forces questioning orders, the Council had voted to abandon the conquest of Earth. They needed every available ship to maintain control of their remaining territories. As the Extinction Fleet prepared to withdraw, Vorthak received one final message from Elena Rodriguez. "Admiral, you and your crew are welcome to visit Earth whenever you choose. Not as conquerors or prisoners, but as guests. We believe that understanding each other is the first step toward building a better galaxy for everyone." The Hegemony fleet that left Earth's system was fundamentally different from the one that had arrived. Many ships carried human observers who had been invited aboard to share knowledge and cultural exchange. Others carried crew members who had requested permission to visit human colonies and learn about their society. 6 months later, Supreme Admiral Vorthak stood in a very different place. Instead of the Grand Council chamber of the Hegemony, he found himself in a simple meeting room on a human space station. Across from him sat representatives from dozens of species, all of whom had once been part of his empire. "The trial will be conducted according to the standards agreed upon by all participating species," the presiding judge explained. She was Altarian, one of the species that had been among the first to join the human alliance. "You are charged with crimes against the freedom of sapient species." Vorthak looked around the room at faces that represented every world his empire had conquered. But instead of hatred or desire for revenge, he saw something that surprised him: hope for justice. The prosecutor was human. The defense attorney was Krex. The judges represented 6 different species. The trial was being conducted according to laws that had been written by cooperation between former enemies. As the proceedings began, Vorthak realized that he was witnessing humanity's true victory. They had not simply defeated the Hegemony. They had replaced it with something better. A galaxy where differences were celebrated instead of suppressed, where problems were solved through discussion rather than force, where justice was administered by cooperation rather than conquest. The humans had kept their promise. When they said no to his ultimatum, they had meant it. But their no had carried an implied offer. Instead of the galaxy he was trying to preserve, they were building the galaxy that could be. Looking up at the stars through the courtroom window, Vorthak could see the lights of 1,000 free worlds, each choosing its own path through the cosmic dark. The sight was beautiful enough to make even a former conqueror believe in hope. Humanity's response had indeed shaken the stars, but what they had shaken loose was not fear. It was the possibility of peace